I pay homage to the Buddha. I pay homage to the Dhamma. I pay homage to the Sangha. So it's been about 2 months since my last talk here at IBMC, in which I was only a couple days into my Bell's palsy. And so I've had a couple months to recover. I'm continuing to heal, but I am much improved. And during those couple months, let me tell you, when you have Bell's palsy, it's pretty wild. Some of the stuff you expect when you hear the stories, You hear that people have difficulty closing their affected eye, so it gets irritated, it gets dried out. People have to use eye drops and stuff like that. And you try to eat food, and some of the food kind of falls out and dribbles out. You kind of drool a little. You look a little silly. But what they don't often tell you, because it's hard to describe, is what it's like to literally feel your nerves regrowing. The various nerve fibers in your face, starting here at the cranial nerve 7, about right here, and it spreads throughout your whole front side of your face. And as you're healing, you can feel all sorts of electrical impulses and sensations going all throughout your face, and it can be deeply unpleasant. And so that meant that during my 2 months of recovery, which wasn't as, let's say, free of distraction as I would have liked. I still had a lot of other responsibilities, but some of my other responsibilities were much lessened, and so I was grateful for that. And with that extra free time, I did 2 things. One was watch a lot of Godzilla movies. Most people don't know that ever since I was a little kid, I've been super into kaiju. So the Criterion Channel has all of the Showa era from 1954 to 1975, and the Heisei era from 1984 to 1995. And so my wife and I were watching some of the Godzilla movies. But outside of that, I spent a lot of time meditating. And oftentimes that's because that's all I could do as I was resting there and feeling my nerves regrow. Because I was too distracted for anything else. And the pain, as it kept flaring up and subsiding and flaring up and subsiding, didn't leave a lot of opportunity for anything else. So I did turn my attention to what was happening in my body and used my meditation to help speed up my recovery and to also give myself something to do, since my attention was on my body anyway. And as I was doing that, it did remind me of a time in my life when I wasn't so good about my practice. Not that I didn't practice, although there was a time in my life when that was certainly true too. But there was a time in my life when I was more the opposite of what they call like a fair weather friend. We all know what that is, right? A fair weather friend is someone who they're around when things are good, but the moment things go bad, they just disappear, right? And when it came to my practice, there was a certain time in my life where I was more like a foul weather friend. And what that meant is that, when things were good, I tended to be too distracted to practice because I had all sorts of fun things going on. I had friends and family and girlfriends and different things going on, and I was just too busy having fun to practice. And would often fall back to times when I was depressed or anxious or lonely or something along those lines, when I would then get more serious about the practice. That's when I would be really there and spending hours and hours and hours and hours meditating. Really, really dedicated and really, really focused, because I was really certain that life sucks, suffering is real, the Buddha was right, and I was really melodramatic about it. A little goth kid when I was younger too, so that's probably part of it. But in the same way that a fair weather friend can't really be called a friend at all, a foul weather friend probably isn't much of one either. Imagine someone who's only around when your life sucks. Kind of hard to really think of them as a friend. You're more like an omen of bad news. Get away from me. And that's kind of how I was in terms of my practice. And so it did become an important thing for me to realize that I needed to be consistent in my practice, to have the ability to keep practicing regardless of what was going on in my life. Whether things were good, whether things were bad, I needed to be cultivating in the same way. And so I would like to think that in this period of my life, I was doing much the same. I had more time to practice, but it's not that my practice was let's say, substantially different. It was the same practice. I just had more time to do it. But it did get me thinking on how we become more consistent in the practice. And one of the things that came to mind recently was what we call in Buddhism the Iddhipada, or the four bases of power, which sounds like really cool. And it's like right up there with like the rings of power, you know. But like it's one of those things where when we talk about it in Buddhism, we tend not to talk about it in this realm of how we become consistent in the practice and how we learn how to practice all the time. The way we receive it in tradition, the Iddhipada have become more like the ways that you gain supernormal powers. And that's to be fair. In the sutta itself and on all the suttas that reference them, that is part of it. That if you practice these things, you'll come to have all kinds of really cool abilities. You know, if you're one, you'll be able to become many. If you're many, you'll be able to become one. Be able to move through solid walls and through the floor. You can sit cross-legged and fly like a bird through the sky and so on. And so that's why in some circles they have really de-emphasized the development of Iddhipada, because it just seems like that's how you're going to develop powers, and that's not the point, which is true. In terms of Buddhism, those kind of powers are not the point. But the Buddha didn't just talk about them in terms of all the cool powers you might get. He also talked about them as parts of what we call the Bodhipakya Dhamma, or the 7 sets of qualities that we develop to become unbound, to become liberated. They're one of the things that we have in our toolbox in our practice. And so these 4 bases, we have qualities that we are pretty familiar with in Buddhism because they pop up a lot. You know, one of the things that I talk about even in our metta meditation is the idea of wholesome desire, right? Chanda is one of these bases. We find too that energy or effort or persistence, virya, which is a path factor, right, is also in this set of 4. And then we have the intent of the mind, citta, as one of these sets. And then we have vimamsa, which is like the quality of investigation, or vimamsa, which is the quality of investigation or discrimination, the ability to perceive things and see what's going on in the body and the mind. And when the Buddha talks about them, he doesn't talk about them as these like things that are auxiliary to the path. He talks about how they're directly related to the path. And so today I wanted to share where he gives an example that is quite profound in terms of what I was talking about, in terms of how we become consistent. This is from the Samyutta Nikaya 5120, an analysis of the bases of power. There's the case where a monk develops the base of power endowed with concentration founded on desire and the fabrications of exertion, thinking, this desire of mine will be neither overly sluggish nor overly active, neither inwardly constricted nor outwardly scattered. He keeps perceiving what is in the front and behind, so that what is in front is the same as what is behind. What is behind is the same as what is in front. What is below is the same as what is above. What is above is the same as what is below. He dwells by night as by day, and by day as by night. By means of an awareness that is open and unhampered, he develops a brightened mind. And then the Buddha says the same for the rest of them, not just for desire, but also for persistence, effort, for intent of the mind, citta, and for also discrimination or investigation. And so we can start seeing how this thing that is often only relegated to the development of these like supernormal abilities starts to be more about how we practice overall, this mindfulness and concentration, the path itself, but also just meditation. We see these aspects where the Buddha talks about how we need to be even-handed in how we practice, perceiving what is in front and behind so that what is in front is the same as what is behind, and the same with day and night. So, looking at desire, how is desire overly sluggish? Whatever desire is accompanied by laziness, conjoined with laziness, that is called overly sluggish desire. And how is desire overly active? Whatever desire is accompanied by restlessness, conjoined with restlessness, that is called overly active desire. And how is desire inwardly constricted? Whatever desire is accompanied by sloth and drowsiness, conjoined with sloth and drowsiness, that is called inwardly restricted desire. And how is desire outwardly scattered? Whatever desire is stirred up by the 5 strands of sensuality, outwardly dispersed and dissipated, that is called outwardly scattered desire. And how does a monk dwell perceiving what is in front and behind so that what is in front is the same as what is behind, and what is behind is the same as what is in front? There's the case where a monk's perception is what is in front and behind, is well in hand, well attended to, well considered, well tuned, penetrated by means of discernment. This is how a monk keeps perceiving what is in front and behind, so that what is in front is the same as what is behind, and so on. So, even though I'm talking about all 4, let's keep the topic just on desire itself. Because desire is one of those things that we hear we're trying to give up in the path. That it's bad to have desires, that it's bad to have wants, that it's bad to try to do anything with like any real passion behind it. And I got to tell you that if I took that way of thinking to my practice, I would be either one version of the fair weather friend, or I'd be some version of the foul weather friend, because I would only do the things when I wanted to do them. And I don't know about you, perhaps you're the other way. Perhaps you're that fair weather friend, that when life is going well and you have time and freedom and you feel good, that's when you meditate. That's when your mind springs to meditation. You're like, you know what? I've already woken up. It's been good. I don't have a crick in my neck. I drank my smoothie. Things are feeling great. I'm going to go meditate now. And when you wake up and you have a migraine, you're like, this is terrible. I don't want to go sit down and meditate. Maybe you're that kind of person. I don't know what it is about me. I'm that other kind of guy. I wake up with a migraine and the first thing I think to do is meditate. You know, this morning, my wife and I just got a new comfy couch. I like to say that I woke up and sat on my cushion instead. I decided to go meditate on the comfy couch. It's a recliner, it's comfy, you know. But it could have easily been like, I'm not going to go meditate at all, you know. It's one of those weird things. We have our proclivities, we have our various things that we're born into, it's part of our karma. When we come into this moment, we have all the karma behind us, we have our inclinations, the way we're built, the way we perceive, what we enjoy. So how do we learn to have the appropriate desire to practice? When we had our meditation this morning, which if you weren't able to make it, we do now have meditation here at IBMC every Sunday from 10 to 10:45. And it's not always me, other teachers here as well are leading it. But it's one of those things that you can do consistently. You can do it every Sunday. And it can become something that you do every day as well on your own or with others. But that consistency has to be better than the kind of consistency that is only based on, let's say, discipline. Although discipline is important. I know a lot of very, very disciplined people. Some of them are very happy. Many of them are miserable. But they hold on to their discipline. They love their discipline. They're very kind of military-minded in how they approach things. I was never that kind of guy. I remember when I was early on in my practice, I would come across people that would talk about the practice as like flossing or brushing your teeth, which is not an act I've like ever really enjoyed. I don't know about you. It's something I do because it needs to be done. But I don't take any delight in the practice. I'm not like, ooh man, this feels good. I'm going to go talk to my dentist in a couple weeks and he'd be so glad my gums aren't bleeding or whatever, right? No, it's just something that needs to be done. And that's not really the way the Buddha talks about these things that we do in the path, these qualities we cultivate. You know, even last week when Sai was giving his talk, he was talking about that story of the Buddha talking to Rahula, right? Can you imagine talking to a 7-year-old and be like, you need to be more disciplined, right? 7-year-old might go like, yeah, probably, but I'm gonna go play with my toys instead. Now, and that's not the kind of person Rahula was, but like you can't really approach that. The way the Buddha did is that he was talking about happiness. He was talking about long-term happiness and welfare and peace. That the things that we do because they make us feel good. They make other people feel good. And so that's part of that desire. It's, one of the ways we can give rise to wholesome desire in our practice is realizing that it feels good to do these things. And so there are times in my life, especially when I was young and I didn't live in a place with such great insulation, that I would wake up in the mornings and the mornings would be quite cold. It's hard to get out of bed when the bed is nice and warm and the room is cold. I'm going to go walk into the other room, sit on a little cushion in a cold room, light my little candle and my incense and just shiver for about half an hour, right? It takes a certain realization about the practice to go that like, yeah, but even when I'm shivering there's something inside that's not shivering. And I want to keep cultivating that. And so that was really important for me to realize that even though there were these outside discomforts, I was giving rise to a comfort inside that wasn't going away, that I could rely on. And it felt good to keep relying on that. And so that gives rise, that reinforces a skillful desire in our practice. And we can see how that connects to other things. If we have this skillful desire to practice because we realize it's something really good, that means that we grow in persistence. We grow in our energy, the way we go about it, our effort, our vidya. That means that once we have this wholesome desire to keep practicing, we try to push ourselves to keep doing it again and again and again. Because we realize that this is good. It's better than medicine. It's medicine that tastes good. Remember when you were a kid and they tried to give you the pills and those sucked? And then they tried to give you the cherry flavored stuff and that wasn't great either. And then I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just at Kaiser, because that's what I had when I was a kid. But all of a sudden they came out with this bubblegum flavored kind of stuff. And you know what? I liked it. I don't know what it was. I would have taken that stuff every day just for fun, And all of a sudden it was a kind of meditation, or rather a medicine that I could take because I liked it. And it was also good for me. And so it's kind of like that. Now perhaps there's another flavor you like. I think I'm kind of weird for liking bubblegum. I used to like bubblegum ice cream too. I don't know if you guys remember that. But that's something that we're like, yes, you take it in, and it's like, this is good medicine. It's healing the body, and it tastes good. Man, that's great. And that's what meditation is. That's what the Eightfold Path is, this path that we're cultivating. Because the Buddha did refer to himself as a physician. He referred to himself as a doctor providing an antidote, right? An antidote to our stress, our pain, our suffering. And so we are doing something that is quite medicinal for our heart and our mind, but it's medicine that tastes good. And so that when we think that way, we're giving rise to wholesome desire, we're giving rise to wholesome effort, persistence. And so that takes us to the realm of the mind, which we've already been talking about. And the reason why we have is because that's what the Buddha said precedes all of this anyway. Everything's preceded by the mind, preceded by the heart, preceded by citta. It's always about this. It's with this very mind that we do any of this. Because that's the thing. The Buddha might be a physician, but all he did was he gave us a prescription. We're not only the ones responsible for making sure we take the medicine every day, we're making the medicine. This is crazy. It's like we're in the kitchen with a mortar and pestle and we're just crushing out everything and kind of mixing up all the ingredients. We're taking all the skillful path factors of the Eightfold Path and kind of working them together and turning them into something that we can take in, and it nourishes the body. The other aspect, investigation or discrimination, this manifests in the path in multiple ways. One of the ways I'll talk about it is that when we're looking at the kinds of things that we do with our time, we have to have a measure of what it is that they do to us, what is their short-term and long-term effect. When I think about myself as the, foul weather meditator, what it means is that when I'm feeling good, I need to remember what it is that made me feel good in the first place and what continues to make me feel good. If I just wake up and go, well, I feel pretty good today, I can skip the meditation. I'm forgetting that it was the meditation that made me feel good in the first place. And what ends up happening is that I end up feeling worse throughout the day, and then another day passes, and I'm like, well, I'm miserable now. Better go meditate. And that's a dummy way to practice. That's not a smart way to practice. It's consistency that keeps you feeling good all the way through. And we can even see this within the meditation itself. You don't even have to think about the scope of your life, days, weeks, months. You can take it down to one session where you've sat down, you've done all the right things. You have hand on top of the other, your eyes are closed, you've given rise to ardency, alertness, and mindfulness. You've set aside greed and distress with reference to the world. And as you're sitting there, you start to feel really good, right? You've been following the breath. You've become very intimate with the breath. You have allowed the breath to become very calming and relaxing. You're being nourished now. You're giving rise to piti and sukha, right? A sense of pleasure, a sense of rapture and delight. And it feels good. But then you start forgetting what got you there. You start forgetting about the breath. And now you're just sort of reveling in the good feeling. You're just kind of, ooh, yeah. And you kind of nuzzle yourself into a big old blanket of pleasure. And then you realize that it starts slipping away. It goes away because you're forgetting what got you there in the first place. Expanding it to our lives, think about the various things that we do. We often talk about happiness, and there are some realms of Buddhism where they're like, actually, it's not about happiness. Happiness is a bad word. It's basically a four-letter word. Never talk about happiness. But when you look at the psychology of who we are as people, you see that anything that we do in some way is meant to alleviate discomfort. We as human beings, we are very discomfort avoidant. Everything that we do when we wake up is meant to alleviate some kind of discomfort. You wake up in bed, it doesn't feel good to lie down anymore, so you sit up because sitting up feels better. You sit up, you start feeling you're hungry. You go into the kitchen, get yourself some food because putting food in your stomach feels better. And you keep doing that until it doesn't feel good anymore. You're starting to get full. So you stop eating because it feels better. And you're always running after something better at any moment, at any time. We all do this. And so part of this investigation, this discrimination, is recognizing what is the greater happiness? What is the lesser? And being able to let go of the lesser to grasp the higher. And so in my life, when I was younger, there were a lot of things that I thought made me happy. A lot of things that I did because in the short term, they did feel good. One of the things that really plagued me was being a massive procrastinator in all of my efforts as a student in school. I was that kind of high school kid that was really intelligent. And so that meant that I could start on this essay right now, but it's only due on Wednesday and it's like Monday. I'm gonna let this essay be tomorrow Stephen's problem. And I did. But the thing is, I was really good at writing. So I would rush all Tuesday, turn in not my best work, but because it was high school and my best work was still pretty good work, I'd get an A anyway. So I was rewarded for my procrastination. And so it kept reinforcing bad habits. So I was like, well, this is still making me happy. I'm happy. My teacher's happy. I have 2 weeks to work on a project. I do it all in one day. I get to feel smart. They think I'm smart. We're happy. And one of the things that's happened is that as I've continued on my journeys and in my studies, I eventually found myself where I am now as a PhD student, where, wouldn't you know, that kind of stuff doesn't cut it anymore. If I do that, it's disastrous, right? It might have gotten me A's in the past, but that kind of behavior does not get me A's now. So my kind of happiness has become more refined. And by being more refined, takes more effort, takes more diligence, takes more discipline, but a different kind of discipline. Now I have to realize in myself that procrastination that I thought made me happy, it's not actually making me happy. That was a fool's kind of happiness. Now giving myself several months to work on a project and really give myself time and space, now it's different because I give myself 3 or 4 months to work on a thing. I get to procrastinate a little bit and then work a lot, and then procrastinate a little bit and work a lot, and the flow of the effort changes. And before I know it, 4 months have come by and I've done 4 months of really good work that I feel proud of. And I turn it in, and hey, my professors are pretty proud too. And everyone gets to feel a whole lot better about the thing. And so now I have a greater kind of happiness that has emerged from that. But it comes through consistency and giving myself space and time to develop this kind of consistency. Which means that, for us practicing this path right here, right now, for any one of you, who's to say exactly where your practice is? Only you know. You know, you're here for a couple hours, you go home. I don't get to know you that well that way. I have no idea what your life is like for many of you, right? But you do. You're there. It's through your eyes that you're seeing the world. So have a measure of your own practice. Have a measure of what you're cultivating in your own heart and mind. And think about the kind of medicine that you're feeding yourself. Is it bitter medicine? Ugh. Is it bitter, so bitter that you're avoiding taking the medicine? How do you make your medicine taste sweet? How do you make your medicine taste inviting, something that you want to take into yourself? Because it's the kind of medicine that leads to your long-term welfare and happiness. But when it's that sweet medicine, it also provides a happiness that's right here and right now. And that's the kind of medicine that the Buddha was talking about. And so these four paths, these four bases of power I'm talking about, although oftentimes they've been talked about in terms of these cool abilities we might have, we can also reframe them in another way. They give us the power to persevere over the obstacles both outside and into our practice. Might they also lead to cool stuff like walking through walls and reading minds and turning into many in one? I don't know, man. I'll get back to you. But one thing I do know from practicing these bases of power is that they have given me the power to overcome many kinds of obstacles, and I know that they can also work for you if you cultivate them in the same way. So that would be my encouragement for you today in thinking about these things, and thinking about your wholesome desire, and thinking about your wholesome effort, and thinking about your mind and your intentions, and then thinking about how you investigate your own life, your own heart, your own mind. And so I'll end with those thoughts.